I wanted to make just a little video explaining why I switched from this camera to this camera. This right here is the Sony NEX VG30, which is a camera that I've been using for the last 3 or so years. I bought it in summer of 2022 and it's now summer of 2025. And it's an interesting camera, and I feel like there's not a lot of content on the internet out there. But I feel like this camera deserves a bit more attention. And then I just moved to the Sony A6400 about a month ago. So, kind of talking about this, why I switched, and kind of the perks of using this camera right here. So this thing takes Sony. It's an APS-C camera. It's mirrorless. It takes the Sony E mount. So if I just pop this off, you'll see that there's full APS-C sensor sitting inside there, and so that means that you can put whatever lens you want on it, pretty much. I've got a prime lens that I have sitting somewhere else. I have the Sigma 30mm f1.4 if you want to do like really good low light, depth of field, shallow depth of field. So that's pretty cool. This camera came out in 2012, so that makes it now what, almost 13 years old. And Sony really pitched this towards like news broadcast companies, universities, things like that. I think when it came out, it was just shy of $3,000 for this camera, and I kind of put it out of the price range of most like content creators around that time when YouTube was kind of picking up. But this was really a competitor to something like Canon's C series, and that I feel like was more geared towards like filmmaking, whereas I feel like this is more like a videography kind of camera. It has the lens that it shipped with, and that was in that kit, was this Sony 18 to 200 millimeter lens. So, to my knowledge, this lens has the widest zoom ratio, zoom range on a power zoom on a mirrorless camera. If you go up to like a B4 broadcast style lens, they do have some lenses that have like a wider zoom ratio. And at the really expensive end, you can get some with autofocus and image stabilization. But this is really cool because it is stabilized, it has autofocus, and it can power zoom like, I think it's 11 times optical. And even some of those broadcast lenses, they start at like a 35mm equivalent. This one starts at like a 28mm equivalent. So I think that's pretty cool. It served me well. It's on an internal zoom, but that's not a deal breaker. And up until, I think Sony discontinued making this lens, but up until a couple years ago, they were still selling this for like $1,400 new, which was kind of crazy. The camera itself, like, was kind of unique too, because a lot of DSLRs around that time had a 30-minute video recording limit, partially because of like tariffs, or tariffs is the buzzword right now. Import duties that the European Union had on video cameras. So I think they would charge like an extra like 8% or something if this was a video piece of equipment versus photo gear. So the industry kind of interpreted that to limit photo style cameras to around like 30 minutes of record time. So this camera, the A6400, and the A6600 that came out at the same time, these came out in 2019 when that import duty was lifted. So these were some of the first like handheld Sony mirrorless cameras that had no video record limit. So that was pretty cool. Panasonic, I think, was one of the exceptions where, so like the camera I had before this was the Panasonic G85. So that camera, the GH5, the GH4, a lot of those similar cameras, also did not have a video record limit. But those have a smaller sensor at micro four thirds, and their autofocus is kind of garbage, which is one of the reasons why I switched to this, because I had been using a B4 lens on the G85, which was manual focus, which was fine because that the zoom's parfocal, but it wasn't stabilized. It had in-body stabilization, but I didn't realize that in order for the in-body stabilization to work on a manual lens, you have to tell the image stabilizer like what your focal length you're at, and that was just a pain. So I was like, this is really cool. Instead of having to rig this up, you just pull this out of a box and it just works. It has a flippy screen, which not even this one has. I feel like the equivalent, here, this can pop up, kind of, yeah, there it goes, there it is, peeking over the top. Equivalent, I'm a menu system. Like, the guts of the A6400 basically went into the ZVE10, so if you want a flippy screen, you can get a ZVE10. This still even does some things that this camera can't. But first, let me just talk about why I moved. So there's a couple things where this really shows its age. One is kind of autofocus, called not. This can track faces and do object tracking, and it also, I think it has phase detect autofocus. None of the marketing materials actually say whether this is contrast detect or phase detect. But based on how it performs, I feel like it's phase detect, given Sony's track record. But one thing that's weird about this is, so I don't know if you can see, maybe I'll do a different video on this. But it's got all these control buttons here, which are super cool. So you've got like one for white balance, one for shutter speed, one for iris or aperture, manual focus, manual exposure, different stuff. So one of the things that's weird about this is that if you have it in anything but auto white balance, it will not autofocus track faces, which is kind of weird. One of the other weird things is that this uses, I guess it's not weird. So the weird thing is that it is the file format that it records in. It has SD card slot right here. It's super convenient. You can take it out even if the camera's like on a tripod without having to do anything. Whereas this one, I'd have to take it off in order to get to the SD card slot. What's kind of weird is that this will record 1080-60 or 1080-24. There's no 1080-30 option. But it will record it in H.264 codec with like a Dolby audio stream. But the file format that it does that in is not MP4 or MOV. It's in a format called MTS, or when you import it through Sony software, it becomes M2TS. That stands for the MPEG transport stream, and that's actually the format that Blu-ray discs use on the inside. So it was smart on their end at that time, because you could take this, and I think you could take those files directly to a Blu-ray disc if you really wanted to. But even though the codec is supported, the file container is not supported by most like social media sites, for example. So if I can't directly give that raw video to a client and have them upload it to their social media, which is kind of a bummer. There's extra workflow steps there. So that was one reason why I wanted to switch. Another reason I wanted to switch was because this thing's kind of big. Like, it's kind of a perk to have this be super big, because it has this big battery on the back that I think is like 3 times the capacity of the one that's in this camera. So it can do really long shoots. I actually learned recently that this can hot swap batteries because, well, I knew this for the whole time. I knew that it had this like DC input port. So let me see if I can show that to you. Pop cable. So if I plug this in, so right here has this DC input port, and I'll flip around that side so you can see the screen. So there's the screen. This is plugged into power right now. Yeah, plugged into the wall. So I can drop the battery out of this. It's still connected and it's still running. So like the screen's still working. You can see my hand through here. So this whole thing can run off of this DC power, which is super cool, and it allows you to hotspot batteries. So I can pop this back in. If my blind, there we go. And then now I can unplug it and it'll still work just fine. So that's a cool perk that this one can't do. But consequence of that is that this battery sticks out like super far. Like if you were to compare where the sensor is on these two cameras, the sensor's like here, and then that's the beginning of the flange right there. Or like the back of the camera. So like here's the sensor, that's the end of the camera. Here, our sensor line is there, and we've got like a full 6 inches. Maybe not 6, maybe like 5 inches from the back of the camera to there. Which doesn't matter if you're on a tripod, but it does matter if you're trying to run this on a gimbal. So I got a Xeon Crane 2 gimbal, and I can only balance this on the gimbal if I have the prime lens on this that's shorter and lighter. If I want to run this lens, I'd probably have to figure out some kind of like counterweight situation to do. But because this has a top handle, like you can get some decent handheld shots out of it. I also really like the viewfinder a lot better on this than on this camera, just because it can articulate like that. The ergonomics on this thing are really good. Like it's just super convenient to be able to hold it here and like look down into the viewfinder. Whereas this one, it's kind of more of an awkward spot for video to kind of hold it. I added this strap, but like I don't know, it's just not as ergonomic because it's smaller, but the compactness definitely helps in certain situations, like on a gimbal. So that's kind of the summary of reasons why I switched. What's kind of weird, I thought like this was gonna be pretty much an upgrade for everything except for power. And even then, like this A6400, you can plug in a micro USB to it and trickle charge. So you can't hot swap batteries like this one can. The trickle charging won't like actually increase the charge of the battery if the camera's running. It'll just keep it from depleting faster. Like overall, you'll get better battery life. So I was kind of let down and realized that there's some caveats on this that this had. One of them is that, let me see if I can show you. If I switch to manual focus, this right here will show me the focus plane distance. So if I change this, there's a little number right here that's telling me what the focus distance is. On this camera, it'll do that for photo modes. It won't do that for video modes. I don't know why. It's kind of annoying. But this has really good focus peaking, whereas the focus peaking on this is kind of mid. There's also some things with the remote control situation. So this can be remote controlled with a little infrared remote, so just like a TV. And the way it does that is through this little part right here. So if you have the big lens hood on, it just doesn't work. But I honestly like hardly ever use that for infrared. What I would mainly use is this tripod handle. So I forget what model this was, but this was an accessory that like you could buy with the camera, and it takes Sony's AVR proprietary connector, but one of the pins on this is link. So that is a remote control thing. So I don't know if you can see it, like I can move this handle like super slowly, and then the zoom on the lens will move really slowly. If I move it fast, that'll move fast. So it has like 2 or 3 different like zoom variable speeds. The lens itself has a little zoom thing on it that lets you zoom it in and out, but having the handle is super convenient if I'm doing like a live event or something like that, because then I just need to have one hand on this and I can move it and zoom it and do whatever I want, instead of having to be like have both hands up. So that was something that I also was kind of concerned about moving here, because this is also a power zoom lens. This is the 18-105, so I've got this plugged in from here to right there. The downside to that is when I'm remote controlling this with this handle, then I can't like use the USB charging thing. I've seen some people like try to DIY a cable that can do that, and I might try that in the future, but it's such a weird connector. Like there are multiple variations of Sony's multi-USB thing, so I don't really know. But you can still like do the variable zooming. And one perk of this lens, so this lens is supposed to be weather sealed. It ends at 105, whereas this one ends at 200. So you get like a 2x zoom different optical like power zoom difference between the two. But this one's internal, which means it plays nicely with my gimbal a bit more. And it zooms faster within its range because it's only having to move the internal part instead of like the whole external part of the lens. So that's kind of cool. Also, when I run this on my gimbal, I can plug it in over USB, and it will charge it, and it can kind of give me it can get me video record start stop and power zoom stuff, but the power zoom implementation on that gimbal isn't great. But still good. Like if I still wanted to do an event, I could do this. If I knew I was really running this for a long time, I could get a dummy battery for this. But I like having a battery in there in case so that if someone trips on a cable or something, you're not hosed. There's some other things I wanted to talk about. This one also supports Bluetooth remote control, but that one doesn't offer like any variability in zoom speed, which is kind of a bummer. What else? I had some notes here. This camera, I'm pretty sure has like no built-in noise reduction, whereas this one does, and it's a newer sensor that's like backside illuminated. So this has like noticeably better low light than this one does. There's one other thing. Oh, the clear image zoom. So the VG30, it has this extra little zoom rocker right here that will normally zoom optically like that. You can also set it to do Sony's clear image zoom, which does a crop on the sensor so that then you can get up to a 2x digital zoom in HD. What's interesting is that so you can toggle that on regardless of what lens is attached. On this, you can set the zoom rocker to be the clear image zoom, and then just use the power zoom through this lever on the lens that will always do the power zoom. But they don't combine into the same zoom. Whereas this one, I feel like it functions closer to what like a point and shoot would do, or even like some of these camcorders, where you can add the digital zoom on top of the optical zoom. And the digital zoom will only engage once you reach the end of the zoom range here. Whereas this is kind of weird where you could have like a 1.5 or a 2x digital zoom when your focal length is like at its widest or at any point in between. So this was kind of weird implementation. So I kind of like how the A6400 implements that. What else? This can shoot 4K 24 without a crop. It can shoot 4K 30 with a slight crop. I'll probably be shooting 1080-60 most of the time because that's my preferred combo for the work that I do. And this can also shoot in the HLG color profile, which I've been pretty happy about, whereas this doesn't really have any log profile. It has like a cinematic or cinematone. It has a cinematone mode, but it's kind of different than their newer ones. So I haven't used it, but I'm also not a huge colorist, so that didn't make a huge difference to me. Another cool bit of history. So this came out in 2012. 2 years after, a year or two after this is when Sony came out with the Sony A6000, which was one of the first cameras one of their first handheld mirrorless cameras where they ditched the NEX line. NEX was for this camera and a lot of their other handheld cameras at the time, like the NEX7, NEX6. And there was also the NEX VG10 and VG20 that came before this, but neither of those had the zoom rocker on it. And this was also the first camera to release with this power zoom lens. So this makes a really good camcorder. It also is equally good at photo, whereas this is more photo first, video second. This is video first, photo second. It has this little like mode button on the back. Let's see if I can tilt that down. Mode button that switches it to photo mode, and then it has a photo button right here that's different than the video record buttons. And when you do that, it can take a burst. It shutters kind of loud, but it does have a mechanical shutter, which is cool. And then it has Sony's multi-connector at the top, so that you could use it with, what am I trying to say? You could use it with external flash. This also has a mechanical shutter, obviously. The ZV-10 does not, so that's something to consider. I feel like in 2025, I'd recommend this camera to someone getting started in videography. Unless you're like doing social media content and like you're going to be traveling and you need something small. That's my brother. But I feel like this would be super cool also as a webcam. Because some of the features that this offers that aren't really on, like I'm thinking about the Canon M50 or R50, right? Neither of those have a headphone jack. They can't be powered continuously. They don't offer a clean HDMI output while also recording internally. Even something like the Sony A6000 didn't have a microphone jack on it. And a lot of those other cameras had the video record limit. So that kind of sums it up. I just sold this on eBay for $750. So I'll be shipping that off probably tomorrow, and then this will be my full-time rig from now on. So just a little ramble about the VG30, the A6400, and some of the things that have progressed through the years with it, and some things that kind of stay the same. So thanks for watching.